like to do is to introduce you to our two speakers for today's talk, Manuel and Rituja. They are going to provide insight into what you can do to master your personal digital brand. Manuel has studied human resource management at the University of Westminster. He is going to talk from a recruiter's perspective in terms of what he looks for in a digital CV and digital footprint. Rituja studied journalism and graduated a couple of years ago, and so Rituja will be a voice for the more recent graduate and current student, giving advice on what she has done to master her own digital brand. Manuel and Rituja are going to each talk for about 20 minutes, and then I will come back online after that with your questions nicely collated, and then I will pose those questions one by one to the speakers. Depending on how much time we have, we might not be able to get through all the questions that you have, but we will do our best. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to our first speaker, and that is Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Laura, and welcome everybody. I hope you can see me okay and hear me okay. I will try to share now, first of all, my presentation. We had some issues earlier, but let's just see if we can make it work. Otherwise, we will just find another way to do it. So 1 second. All right, here we go. I hope everybody can see the first slide now. If not, somebody probably just like, oh, Laura, let me know if you can't see it.
It's all good, Manuel.
All good.
We can see.
Perfect, great. So welcome everybody. I want to talk a little bit more today about, basically about a few things with regards to debunking some of the myths that are around CVs, but also then how can you bring that back from a kind of a CV into your LinkedIn profile, and in general, how can you better share your story online. And obviously I will kind of probably talk more from the recruiter's perspective and Ritu then more from a recent graduate's one, but I think hopefully we both kind of tell you similar things, but just from a slightly different perspective maybe. Before we do that, one little neat feature that most of you probably don't know on LinkedIn is you can actually very easily connect with somebody just by using a QR code. I know we all know these QR codes by now because COVID check-ins and everything else we have to do at every restaurant we go into, but we can also use it for LinkedIn networking. So if you have the LinkedIn app on your phone and you open it up, you might see on your top search bar on the right side 4 little dots. And if you click on those little dots, it actually opens up a QR screener, and you can either share your own QR code so somebody else can scan it, or you can scan somebody's code. So you could, for example, do that now and scan my code that is there on the slide, and if you do that, it will bring you straight away to my LinkedIn profile, and then you could connect with me or look at my profile. So it's just a little hack in case you are in a networking situation or you're meeting somebody and you want to exchange LinkedIn details. But yeah, a little bit about myself. So I graduated from Westminster a number of years ago. I did my master's actually while I was still working. I always like to share that picture because it's from a very happy day I had with my husband when we got married in London. It's also an example of some of the content I'm actually sharing on LinkedIn that I see as part of my personal or professional brand. I'm a big believer, and I will go in a bit more detail later on in the presentation. I'm a big believer that you can't just basically separate your professional brand and your personal brand. You're one person, and you show up in different scenarios. And so there is a professional version of yourself you put forward on platforms like LinkedIn, for example, or in the workplace. And I believe that that should be the same, or like a very similar version to who you are personally with your family or your friends. And so I try to always give some insights into my own life on LinkedIn as well, because I feel it's important when you build relationships with colleagues or when you speak to customers, or in my case, as a recruiter as well, I'm speaking a lot to candidates. So I'm married, living in London. Originally, as you might hear from my accent, and the name gives it away as well, the last name, I'm from Germany. I'm here for 12 years, and I'm currently running the recruiting and people function for a company called Samsara, which is actually a very interesting tech company in this whole space of Internet of Things, which, in my opinion, kind of a huge future growth area for new technology for the coming years. But enough about me. Let's dive right into the content. As I said, I want to start a little bit about good old CV. CV obviously is not bad. It is still there, and we need to obviously know what are kind of things we can do in order to get ourselves with the best foot forward and a foot in the door. But then also want to talk more about your LinkedIn profile, which I see as a basically digital extension of your professional brand. Then talk a little bit about storytelling online or on LinkedIn specifically, and then some key takeaways from my short presentation. And as Laura mentioned before, any questions you have, just type them in the chat or let somebody know, because we have enough time for question later. So it would be obviously great to make sure everybody can ask anything they want. So, few myths about CVs that I kind of carried over the last 15 years I've been working in recruitment. So the first one, I called it the 10-second rule. So if you Google that, there's lots of talk about how many seconds are recruiters looking at your CV before they reject or basically decide to put you forward. And I read like 10 seconds, 6 seconds, 15 seconds. So I kind of settled somewhere in between. So 10-second rule. Now, the truth is, yes, recruiters have limited amount of time, and they probably skim or scan your CV very, very briefly, and they probably don't take, if they're experienced, they probably don't take more than 10 seconds to do that. And in those 10 seconds, they will decide if they either reject or if they read on. But it doesn't mean that after 10 seconds that they're completely done. But what it means is like you have 10 seconds on your CV to convince a recruiter that it's worth to probably spend another 1, 2, or 3 minutes on your CV, and then basically pick up the phone and call you or drop you an email to invite you for an interview. So it's very important, obviously, to have that, that 1 or 2 things that stand out on your CV. So the rule is kind of, or the 10 seconds are kind of true. It doesn't mean that a recruiter is like only spending 10 seconds on CV. Usually then they go much deeper. And it's obviously important to give a lot of information then as well. Second one, there is an I in hire. I put that in as a reference to the phrase that you probably heard many times, there is no I in team, which is referring to the importance of collaboration and teamwork, which I 100% agree with. But if it comes to recruiting and if it comes to you putting yourself forward in the interview process, you need to really think about the I, because the I is what gets you hired. Recruiters and hiring managers want to know, of course, that you can work in a team and collaborate, but they want to know what has been your specific contribution, what has been your kind of specific role to make a project successful or to get a team a successful outcome. They don't want phrases like we or kind of vague phrases in CVs. They really want to understand what has been your specific impact or contribution. So therefore, there is an I in hire, and it's important to talk about you specifically when you when you write a CV or when you interview later on. And this then brings me to number 3. I've seen too many CVs that are basically just a rewrite of a job description. If you apply for a role and you have done that job before, or even if you haven't, you can assume that the person reviewing your CV knows the job. So there's no point just repeating very basic tasks. So I'll give you an example. If you are applying for a job as a recruiter, there's no point putting on your CV only the fact that you are posting job descriptions, that you're reviewing CVs, that you are interviewing candidates. I mean, I expect that, because if you're a recruiter, you're applying for a role as a recruiter, I would assume that this is what you've been doing in your previous roles. What I want to know is the achievements you had, the impact you had. So I want to know how many people did you hire? What was the quality of your hires? Where did you find these people? How versed are you with talent branding or other things? So what I want to see on your CV is achievements over tasks or responsibilities. Other big mistake that people do, and I put it here under one size does not fit all, is you spend a lot of time as a candidate putting your CV together, and then you're very proud of it, and then you have it, and then you just send it everywhere. And that is not the best approach. It is important to obviously, I call it have a master CV, have one CV where you put everything in that you've done and where it's all nice and neat and tidy. But then when you apply for specific roles, and that links back to the first point, to the 10-second role, it is important that you tailor your CV to that specific company, that specific role that you're applying for, so that the recruiter who reads your CV decides in the first 10 seconds that your CV is worth kind of reading more and getting more into depth in. And that means basically, if you have your, what they call it, the master CV, you might just take elements of it, you might edit certain things, you might move certain points, you might move certain things further up and other things further down, and you send it for a specific role to make really sure that it is completely tailored and gives you the best shot in getting a first interview for that position. And then the last point, and as like, if you don't like take away anything from my presentation today and just remember one thing, make it this one: your LinkedIn profile is not your CV. So very, very important. I've seen too many people pasting their CV and just into their LinkedIn profile. I don't think that's the best way forward, and I tell you why. Number one, because LinkedIn or your LinkedIn profile should be much more than just like there to get you a job. That is one of many reasons why people are on LinkedIn, but it's not the only reason. And so you shouldn't just treat it as a CV, as a bullet point of things. Your LinkedIn profile be a complete digital representation of who you are as a professional. And it should go much further than your CV, and it should be written in a different tone and with a different audience in mind than your CV would be. So that's kind of the 5 areas that I wanted to briefly cover on from a recruiter's perspective when it comes to CVs, and hopefully that resonated and you find that useful. So let's go to the second section around the LinkedIn profile. I already mentioned that before. And number one, I mean, if you have seen my LinkedIn profile, you know I used to work for the company, so I know LinkedIn quite well. I've been there for 6 years. And some of the questions when I did these sessions with students is always people like saying, do I really need a LinkedIn profile? Is it too early? When do I need one? Why should I be on LinkedIn? Isn't LinkedIn just for leaders and for managers and people like further down in their career? And obviously, absolutely not is the answer to that kind of question. And here's the reason why. So, as I said before, LinkedIn is not only to get hired. That is one of the reasons why people are on LinkedIn. It's a big one, but it's only one of them. Number one for you as a student, why you should be on LinkedIn or as a recent graduate, is because you get more connections to other people in the professional world. You build your network very easily. And networking, I can say from my own experience, is super important, especially when it comes to finding jobs, because usually most companies I worked for in the recruitment or HR team would find about a third of their employees via referral. Referrals is nothing else than somebody who works in a company, knows a bunch of people, and recommends them for jobs. So if you have a good network, then there's a very high chance that you have a better opportunity, a better chance to find a good job. And then the second, like we had hired, we had connecting, the one in the middle, staying informed, is obviously also an interesting one because it helps you to build your knowledge about a certain industry or about a certain area. And also it's a great way to exchange ideas with other people and just keep up to date on what's happening in specific areas of interest. And then second, going too fast. Second thing, the word of word is changing. So yes, it's important to be on LinkedIn. It's also important to understand the word is changing, and there's a lot of things moving very fast. And I'm not talking only about this year, which has obviously been extraordinary and given us so many more challenges on top of everything else. But in generally speaking, even before the global COVID crisis, we had a situation that it's a very competitive market. There's lots of students out there fighting for jobs. There's a kind of development going on with regards to technology and disruption. That means that we have new skills emerging all the time. The things we learn today is probably you need to kind of completely upskill us every few years in order to stay relevant. And we also don't know yet what this kind of the technology disruption would mean for the future. What kind of new career paths and industries and jobs will there be in 4, 5, 6, 7 years? So there's a lot of change, and that means also it's obviously good as a student just to be connected, keep your options open, and start early on in building your networks and your footprint. Now, when it comes to LinkedIn, before I go through a few different areas in the LinkedIn profile that I found interesting or important, I would always say my biggest guidance when people say, how should I basically present myself on LinkedIn, is basically this quote from one of my favorite quotes, actually, from Oscar Wilde, who said, "Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken." And I think that has always been my guiding principle. Be authentic. Be authentic. Be yourself when you are at the workplace, but also, or when you work from home, but also when you present yourself online. So LinkedIn, I see it as I said before, it's like a professional network. So obviously you want to put your professional persona forward, but that doesn't mean that this is a very different person to how you would present yourself on Facebook or on TikTok or on Snapchat or on Instagram. Obviously, it's the same as if I go to the opera or if I go to a beach party in Ibiza. I dress up differently, I behave slightly differently, but I'm still the same person. And it's the same here when you're in these different online social media arenas. Yes, you focus on different things. You have a different audience, and you slightly, obviously, adjust your messaging and your tone. But behind that, you should still be authentic in yourself. And I know that Rituja will talk much more later about those kind of things. How can you actually arrive at that point that you know what you want to stand for and who you truly are and what person you want to portray? It's just a bit of like backdrop. But when we look at the LinkedIn profile and a few of the elements that are important, picture, always a favorite of mine. Believe it or not, there's still lots of people on LinkedIn who don't have a picture, a profile picture. I always say, like, if you are without a profile picture on LinkedIn, it's like turning up to a networking event with a paper bag over your head. It's not much point in that, because people want to see you. They want to know who you are, and usually they also want to have a visual to that. So putting a picture on your profile is very important, because as you can see here, it means you get 21 times more profile views. Which also means, obviously, when you get more views, you're getting more traction, you're getting probably more people looking, your recruiters looking at your profile, people engaging with your content, which means you're showing up more often in other people's activity feed. So all these kind of things. So it's obviously important, especially if you're looking for a job or want to get noticed, that you have a picture on your profile. It doesn't have to be a professionally taken one. It could just be a nice picture of you, ideally shoulder upwards. There's lots of filters now you can use in LinkedIn as well to make you look as good and as possible as you like. And I would always say dress for the job that you want. So if you are applying for jobs in a more conservative environment, like in financial services or insurance, then maybe you should dress a little bit more in a suit if you're a man, or a little bit more formal if you're a woman. But if you obviously apply for a more creative or different job, then you can also obviously be a little bit more relaxed in your dress code. And I just saw the question popping up: does the LinkedIn picture need to be in a color or in black and white? Absolutely up to you. I think this example here of Cornelius, it is in black and white, but it could be anything. I think whatever you feel comfortable with. I think it's important that it portrays you in a way that you feel confident, and obviously that you can see clearly the picture, the face of the person. So the closer the better. That's why I said from the shoulders upwards, because otherwise it can be quite tiny when people look at you on a phone screen, for example. Next one important to look at is what you put down there with regards to work or volunteer experience. Again, you shouldn't just put there your job titles. You should always put a little bit of story around what have you done. And to my point earlier, more importantly, what have you achieved? What have you learned? What was the kind of biggest moment, or what are you most proud of in that specific area that you did, so that people understand a little bit more what they could be probably approaching you for. And if you're a student or recent graduate, I get it. You probably don't have a lot of jobs, like I would call them like full-time jobs that you had. You probably had like volunteering experience, you probably had internships, you probably have done work experience, or you have been working somewhere to kind of earn the money for your studies. But all of that is work experience worth mentioning on your LinkedIn profile. I would just always think about more from the perspective of what have you learned. So instead of like just saying, oh, I was like jobbing in I don't know, working in a restaurant or in a bar. Okay, great. But then you can flip this and say, well, it's about customer service. It's about working in a team. It's about working under pressure. It's about being creative, thinking on your feet, dealing with customer complaints. So whatever you want to spin it, I think it depends on the jobs you're applying for, but you should always be thinking from that perspective. What transferable skills have I learned in that specific stint, volunteering or whatever it was, and put this on the forefront in the LinkedIn profile. And then obviously you can also add, and that's a great thing in comparison to your CV, you can add photos and videos and all the different things. So let's say if you volunteered at an event and you presented something or you organized something, then you can obviously bring this to life by adding pictures or videos of that as well. And then last comment on the LinkedIn profile, that's my favorite. So again, if you don't remember much from my presentation, keep this one in mind, draft summary. It's something that not everybody has on their LinkedIn profile. There's also some pretty awful and pretty basic summaries on there, which I don't think is very helpful. I think the summary is one of the most important things on your LinkedIn profile. I call it prime real estate. It's literally the first thing people see beneath your picture and your headline. And it's kind of the gateway into your LinkedIn profile. It's your elevator pitch. It's this kind of thing. If you have a half a minute to explain to somebody what you're all about, that's what is it. And similar to your CV, where I said recruiters probably take about 10 seconds before they decide if they read on or if they reject you for a job. You probably have the same thing on LinkedIn, that people will make a decision very quickly if they want to scroll down on your profile or if they want to go to the next profile. And so that is a great opportunity to basically make them want to scroll down and find out more about you, having a very compelling summary on the top. And I would say the recommendation, keep it short and sweet, 2 or 3 paragraphs, 100, 150 words, but make it very relevant and be quite clear in your summary what you actually want. So if you're looking for a new job, put it in there. If you're offering advice for people, put it in there. If you're interested in sharing ideas or exchanging thoughts on something, whatever it is, I would just put it in there and make sure people know why they should be connecting with you and why they should be having you in their network. Talking about networking, don't worry, there's a bit of an ISO or eye test, that kind of slide. I'm not talking through all of that, and you get the slides, I believe, anyway from Hayden later on. But one thing here I want to focus on is maybe just the headlines. So think about connecting with people that are outside your own experience or silos. Think about diversity of your network. Think about connecting with people that might have not studied the same as you, haven't gone to the same university, are not living in the same country, and so on, so that you get a really interesting, diverse network. And then put time aside every couple of weeks or so to nurture your network, to reach out to people, to connect with them, to look at what they've posted and maybe comment on some of their posts and stuff, because this actually will then help you to actually build a really active network and get more traction. And last advice is number 3 here, the board of advisors. What I mean with that is basically find a few people in your network that you trust and ask them if they want to be on your board of advisors. And what it means basically is these are people that you can go to if you need get a different perspective. And you should choose, again, these people as different as possible so that you know that you can go to them for different things and they don't have to all be subject matter experts in the areas that you work. It could be, for example, I mean, now it's a bit of a cliche, but my mom is one of my closest advisors still, and she has no clue what I'm doing, literally no clue. She has no clue about what LinkedIn does or what Samsara currently does. She doesn't know how to recruit somebody. She's a tax advisor. She has a very different experience, but she is a great advisor in many ways because she is not too close to certain things and she can give me very objective perspective on things. So from that perspective, I would always say, choose your board of advisors not based on what they know about the specific area you're in, but more about what can they add to you, to your blind spots, or to areas where you're probably not very good at yet. So that's what I want to spend on LinkedIn and networking. I know I saw lots of questions popping up, and I think we can maybe hopefully get to them later on in the Q&A section. And then last section before I want to wrap up is a bit more about professional branding and telling your story. And I put that in there because I know a lot of people I speak to, and by the way, not only students and graduates, also a lot of very senior people in companies are very nervous when it comes to do I post on LinkedIn, right? So there's lots of stories about people getting in trouble because they posted something they shouldn't have, and then the company found out, and then it all kind of went from there. And yes, these things happen. And now that I work in HR, I can tell you I've seen a few of them myself, and it's not pretty when it happens, and it can be sometimes lead to people getting into trouble because of things that they posted online. Because online doesn't mean it doesn't count. You know, it's the same like as if you say to somebody in real life in person. But I found always important, if you use a guiding principle, the one that I use usually is, if I'm posting something now, would I be comfortable if the same thing would be published tomorrow, the front page of the New York Times? If the answer is no, then I probably shouldn't post it. And if the answer is yes, then there shouldn't be any problems. And so that's kind of how I would think about it. And to give you a few examples, I just took a few screenshots of recent posts I did on LinkedIn. And you can see here, I chose them because every of those 4 posts is like touching on a different part of my professional brand. So it's on the left with the laptop. That is basically me sharing sharing something that I learned, you know, like it's something about my job. So I would put it in the bracket of thought leadership or knowledge sharing, expertise. So I'm obviously, my expertise lies in HR and recruitment, and so I would share things that I learned or things that I observed that I probably would hope that the network finds interesting if they are basically working in a similar area. And then I have the second bucket. This is a post I did about Black Lives Matter a few months ago when there was the big blow up in the US, and that is around the topic. I did it from the angle of my passion of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and basically how do I, as a professional, what does this Black Lives Matter movement mean for me as a professional, for me as an HR leader in the field, and what do I commit to do differently to help companies, and especially the company I work for, to be more inclusive of everybody. So that was more with regards to my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I posted also about stuff that my company does. So in this case, Samsara, they sent a little nice holiday gift in summer. I had another picture I couldn't put on. You see it on my LinkedIn feed this morning. They sent us a Halloween package as well with like lots of stuff and candy and so on. So I'm doing this because obviously as a recruiter, I want to attract people to our brand. And so that's why I'm sharing those kind of things about Samsara or about LinkedIn when I was working there. And then the last one we already talked about, I share stuff about myself. That was our 10 years wedding anniversary, and there was a picture from our wedding with my parents and my husband's brother and sister and their wives and husbands. So basically, that was just like to show personal side of myself. I believe that you can't build strong relationships in the workplace without knowing each other and telling your personal story as well. So there's just a few examples. Hopefully, they give you a bit of an insight on how I think about what type of content I'm posting and why I'm posting it, and how it links back to my professional brand and how I want to be perceived online. And then I'm going to wrap up because I know Ritu is ready to share her thing as well. So basically, just want to finish with a few key takeaways. So if you have been asleep for the last 20 minutes, or if you have been in trouble getting online or listening to me, or if you have been making a cup of tea and you didn't get the full presentation, and this is a slide to pay attention now. This is like the 5 key takeaways from my presentation. So number 1, You have 10 seconds to impress recruiters on your CV, so make it count and make it very specific what you put on your CV and very tailored. Number 2, always focus on your achievements, not your tasks. I don't care what you did. I care what was the impact that you had in the role that you did. Number 3, my favorite, LinkedIn profile is not your CV. So please, please, please don't just copy paste your CV into your LinkedIn profile. Be a bit more creative than that. Number 4, get your personal board of advisors, people around you that are different to you, they bring a different perspective, probably fill in a blind spot, to help you to grow. Very important, especially very early on in your career. And then number 5, remembering Oscar Wilde, be yourself, everybody else is already taken. So be authentic and tell your story. And that's it from me. So first of all, thank you very much. We see each other again in the Q&A, and I will hand it over now to Ritu, who will talk you more about her own experience and how to build a strong personal brand.
Ritu, you're on mute.
Apologies. Here I am, everybody. I was just so engrossed in Manuel's talk, I just couldn't. Anyway, hello, everybody. I'm Rituja. It's great to follow everything that Manuel has just said. Everything Manuel has said is like a magic handbook, like perfectly nailing what your LinkedIn CV looks like, what your digital brand is, and how to really get yourself out there with all the professional networks out there. I will be talking a little bit more about what my brand looks like. I graduated from the University of Westminster 2 years ago, and I'm sort of going to use my digital brand as an example of how I am navigating the world that Manuel has just put in front of us. So yeah, from there, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Rituja. I studied journalism at the University of Westminster, after which I actually went on to get a job in technology. And all of that happened because I was working in tech journalism and I got super interested in tech and found an opportunity that propelled me into this industry. Since I've been in technology, it's been a big whirlwind in the sense of me realizing what my real passion is and really waking up to my potential and actually going through a massive rebrand, essentially, in my own life. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what my digital brand is, what my channels look like, how I use them in my day-to-day life, and what opportunities I've been able to create because of my digital brand. So to give you a little bit more background about me, my day job is that I work as an IT consultant and project manager for a company called Sparta Global. And since then, I've sort of moved on with my first client based out of Northampton. I work in the banking industry, which isn't necessarily the most interesting industry. But what I've felt since I've done that is I can actually be a little bit more vocal about my achievements and get the word out there of all the interesting work I do in traditionally a more boring industry. And that's how I kind of really found my voice on LinkedIn. I am also an emerging leader, is what I call my brand. I advocate a lot about skills diversity. If you have studied something else but want to work in a different industry, I'm a massive advocate of diversity and inclusion. I also do a lot of work around upskilling, and I show the world very actively on everything that I do by myself to upskill myself. And then finally, I'm also a board member, and I'm an aspiring non-exec director, and I've recently backed my first board role. And these are the kind of things that I do that are all listed on my LinkedIn. But what I was trying to show you through this is that I am so many things. I am my day job. I am my own passion. I'm, things that I do extracurricularly. And that's everything that I want to show the world as part of my digital brand. Another interesting point that I wanted to highlight was that, as I mentioned, I went from journalism to technology. And that was an interesting shift, but it also meant that I had to change what that looked like online. I had to give my LinkedIn a very big rebrand. I had to look at my Twitter, I had to look at my Instagram and start thinking, how do I want to be this person? How do I want to be this technology leader that I see myself as? So I will be talking a little bit more about that as well. And finally, I think I've created some slides, but most of my content is still just around my brand. So I do encourage you to check me out online, look at my brand, and probably see and relate to what I'm saying on my talk. Yeah, so without further ado, let's jump into my slides. There we go. I hope everybody can see my slides okay. Right, so, across my slides, I've interlinked my entire digital brand, all my channels. So please do check me out. Great. So how do I define personal brand? Personal brand to me is your story. It's who you are, what you stand for, your values, and most importantly, the way that you express yourself. And I feel like increasingly your personal brand is your digital brand. There really isn't a massive difference anymore between the two. I mean, as a generation who's born online, who lives online, it is one of those things that we must embrace about it and carry a personal brand very confidently throughout all our digital channels. Right? So, Manuel has really summarized brand very well, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think are the elements of digital brand and walk you through all these elements that are part of my digital brand. So yeah, let's start with brand identity. I think this is exactly what you want to show your audience. So remember that you're in complete control of your brand identity. You define it and you show it to the world. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about your story. Your story, like Manuel said, is who you are. There's nobody else like you. So this is completely yours, and own it. Own it everywhere you are, online, in person, absolutely everywhere. Then I'm going to talk more about channels. So you can have as many of these channels or as few of these, but be critical about what you choose it as your channel and how much energy you spend on it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about consistency, authenticity, consistency just being, constantly on it, keeping super updated, updating your digital brand as often as your life updates itself. Authenticity is, just keep it real, keep it human, and finally networking is how to get your brand out there, how to get more people looking at your brand. Wonderful. So talking about brand identity, it's very interesting when you're a student or young graduate trying to think, what is my brand identity? A lot of people tend to think about brand identity as something you probably only have when you're super successful or if you're in senior leadership role. I, in my experience, have found it to be the other way around. Brand is just about you regardless of what part of your career you're in, and it can tell your story about your career stage, and it can change over time. So I have put together some questions that you can ask yourself to help you arrive at brand identity, and this is an exercise I did myself. I did it myself to just think, who am I, what do I do, and what do I bring that people would be interested in. So I've made it quite simple. I've just said, what do you stand for? What makes you different? And most importantly, how do you want people to talk about you? How do you want people to see you? Considering that kind of ensures with your brand identity, you're getting your best foot forward and being noticed for what you want to be noticed for. And then finally, the best way to conclude this activity is choosing 3 primary phrases and using this as your foundation of your brand. It's not all of you, but it's the main things, the first 3 things that you want people to see about you. So just put together my brand identity and how I describe it. I see my brand identity as an emerging leader, as a tech speaker, and an IT consultant. I would just like to break this down. So emerging leader. The reason I do that is because I aspire to be in a leadership role, and I see myself as an emerging, so somebody who has the potential and is a rising star essentially. So I own it, I'm very proud of it, and I really convey that through everything that I do online. A tech speaker, I see myself as somebody who has a unique perspective to offer. And again, I own it and I call myself a tech speaker, an IT consultant. This is when I think my aspiration, my profession comes into play. And I also want to get that out there. I want to be seen as a effective IT consultant known for what she does. Wonderful. Just moving on. So how to express your brand identity. I've put together a few points of what I think is the best way to get your brand identity out there. It is the first thing that people see on your digital channels as your brand. So it's your LinkedIn headline. I think Manuel also spoke a lot about, your summary, your headline. To me, anything that you see on the screen is my brand identity. If you were to look me up online or follow me, these are the first things you'd see about me, and you would make a decision if you want to continue reading about me and connect with me. So the first thing is my LinkedIn headline. And as you can see, I've ensured that I mention my three, primary brand words. So I see myself as an emerging leader. I call myself a tech speaker, a tech blogger. I make sure that I'm getting it out there that I am an IT consultant. And then, as Manuel rightly said, your profile picture. And something that I think is increasingly important is probably your cover image. This is how I see myself. If you were to ask me, and I think I want the world to see me like that. So I took a picture that really represents who I am, and yeah, and surprisingly, that's actually a picture from a WaterX event. So that's great. And then I think the same principle then applies to Twitter and Instagram if you choose them to be your, your channels at all. And then moving on. Very important thing that I wanted to mention was that this is your brand identity. But everything that point onwards is also your brand identity. So you need to ensure that you're always remembering that and taking that across all your content. Moving on. Your story. This is something I kind of thought about as one step forward from your brand identity. This is something that you want your audience to know as soon as they're completely invested in your brand. And your story is how to convey that further, that your brand is actually really you. So the best way, in my opinion, to highlight your story is your LinkedIn About section. And as you might notice, I talked about your LinkedIn headline in brand identity, but I talk a lot more about story in your About section. Now you have about 150 words to describe yourself, tell your audience a little bit more about yourself. Along the same lines, it can be your About section, it can be your pin tweet on Twitter, and it can be your Instagram highlights when you think about your story. Another thing to remember is that none of this is constant. It's completely dynamic. As your life changes, as you do more things, as you get more roles, as you evolve, so will your story. So as your story changes, so will your brand change. And so essentially your digital brand is super fluid, and don't be restricted by it. You can genuinely update these things as you go. You can change it completely. You can completely reconstruct it. And that really helps because it really shows your growth as a person. So to give you an example of what I write in my About section in my LinkedIn, I kind of talk a little bit more about my entire journey. So a little bit more chronologically as to what I studied, what I went on to work in, and since I've been working there, what my achievements have been, if I've been recognized, if I've had any new extra voluntary roles that I've been doing. And that I think helps people a chronological order of my growth, and they can then see the potential that one might have. Now, just superimposing that with the idea of us, like either being a student or a young graduate, it really shows somebody who's completely interested in their career. It shows somebody who's trying to do more, learn more, and really get themselves out there. So yeah, I'll kind of now move into a little bit about channels and how I have different channels to convey different parts of brand. Great. So The biggest thing I want you to know about when it comes to channels is choose your channels in service to your brand and your audience. What I mean by this is that we all come from very different, academic backgrounds probably. We want to go into different industries. Every industry and every profession sort of has a way of doing things. And we should probably think about our brand identity as something we want to excel, in those channels per se. So to give you an example, in my industry, LinkedIn is, of course, the most professional social network to be on. I think of Twitter as a way to get my, emerging leader or thought leader sort of identity out. Twitter is quite good if you're trying to, have an edge, be a little bit more different than people around, and you want to get your thoughts out there in a little less professional manner than you could on LinkedIn. So Twitter is a wonderful thing. And then I also have an Instagram that I'm increasingly using, and the reason for that is because I'm trying to connect with a younger generation, because I'm trying to talk a lot more about what you can do well in your early careers. I'm going to talk a lot about skills diversity, and that's the reason I've chosen that channel. And then to kind of probably comment on some other industries. To give you an example, if you are probably an artist, or if you have sort of like a music background, if you're an artist, you have to have Behance. I don't have a Behance, but probably you want to have a Behance, and you want to make sure that's updated. If you're into music, you probably want to have a SoundCloud. If you're into a lot more like technical side of technology, then you want to have a GitHub. And especially if you're somebody who's like a freelancer, you want to make sure you have a website. So these things really help, make your brand a lot more consistent across online. So if somebody Googles you, they see that you already have a LinkedIn, you already have Instagram, you have something a lot more specific to your industry, and it really helps them stitch your entire story and your entire career together. So let's just have a look at what I do with my channels. So I've just taken a quick snapshot of my brand identity on my channels. This is LinkedIn, that's Twitter, and that's Instagram. On my LinkedIn, as you can see, I kind of want to have the same picture out there. I feel like I want people to see the same picture and probably, instantly recognize me. I also try to have a more sort of a language across it. So I kind of, tend to use the same images if I can. And then finally, if you look at the bio, so my LinkedIn headline, my Twitter bio, and my Instagram bio, I have tried to ensure that I use the same words, the 3 primary words from my brand ID, and I keep repeating them essentially. It's because I'm trying to ensure that if somebody looks up all my profiles, they still see the same person who I really am. They see that I'm really passionate about what I do. And something else to probably notice is that I feel like I'm the same person on all 3 channels, but I choose to communicate the same thing in different ways. On Instagram, I'm a lot more visual. So as you can see, I'm trying to sort of, build like a brand language around it. I'm sharing stories about some travel stuff, something a little bit more personable, a little bit more about sort of, what I go through as a young professional. My Twitter is a lot more sort of like thought leadership. I talk about my opinions. I talk about articles that I've read, books that I've read, and how I feel about the world and what I see in the world. My LinkedIn, I tend to sort of, preserve it or save it for more of like my professional achievements. And I do talk a lot about what I'm doing, but also always connect that to what my career goals and my ambition is. Yeah, that's a little bit about my channels. I also wanted to touch a little bit upon authenticity and consistency. I think Manuel has completely explained to us what authenticity is, and I can't do any more justice to it, so I'll probably sort of leave that a little bit out. When it comes to consistency, I sort of just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that consistency is 3 things. It's 1, you want to be a consistent, brand across all your digital channels, and that's what I meant by sort of, having some elements that repeat on your channels. And then when it comes to the second thing, that's a little bit more to do with how often you update your channels. So it's possible that you choose that there is one channel where you get most engagement for. So you want to make sure you update that more often than others, but also understand that what kind of content you want to get out on each of your channel. And finally, the third thing is just about, having some sort of like a strategy around how often you want to post on it, exactly who you want to see your posts, etc. To give you an example, I sort of have a timetable around how I want to maintain my digital channels. So on LinkedIn, I try and post strategies. I try and post about, I would say, if not too often, then at least twice a week. On my Twitter, I make sure that I have my tweet deck. I'm sure some of you might have used it. If not, just Google tweet deck. It helps you kind of, stagger your tweets across and post it at a certain time. So you can take some time and like plan your Twitter feed, essentially. With my Twitter, I tend to post once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the evening. And that helps drive engagement through my channel. And then with Instagram, I try and post once every day if I can. But with stories, I ensure that I'm posting at least 2 or 3 every day. And I'm a lot more personal on them. I talk about exactly what I'm doing that day. I talk about what helps me concentrate. I talk about what I've eaten that day, how I've exercised, etc. What that really does, in my opinion, having a strategy is that if somebody finds me via LinkedIn, and then discovers my Twitter and discovers my Instagram, what they are doing is they're really discovering my whole self. And with my strategy, I feel like somebody could be following me on all 3, and they will see different parts of my day by different channels. And that will help them kind of keep coming back to my brand. Wonderful. Just moving on to another element that I mentioned at the start, which was networking. As a student and as a young graduate, this is probably the biggest reason that we have a digital brand and a digital channel. Networking is genuinely the underlying part of trying to get yourself out there, trying to find opportunities and roles, etc. So I have a few tips when it comes to networking. The first one being define your audience. And this can happen on every different channel. Try to post the kind of content that your audience is more likely to interact with. So on LinkedIn, I try and keep it, more professional. I want recruiters to look at it. I want mentors to look at it, etc. With Twitter, I try and keep it very vocal. I want people to find me and think of me as somebody who has opinions and good opinions and opinions that they can relate with. And then with Instagram, I try to keep it more personal, so people feel like that they can approach me and talk to me, etc. And another way of defining your audience is probably using the right hashtags with your content. So the right people who are on these channels, they can discover you through these hashtags. The next point is about researching your industry and following the experts. This has worked very well for me, actually. I feel like if I'm trying to explore a new topic or get into a new industry, I really research it. I follow all the top companies in it. I will try and follow all the experts. What it does is it kind of, you're basically tricking the algorithm of the platform to see you as somebody who also does the same things like the experts, and it tends to kind of amplify all your content. And it also helps, people who look you up online to see that you belong to that circle. And then finally, a few more things that has really helped me actually aggregate my career has been, straight up asking people for just informational and informal interviews. I just message, some people sometimes and say, hi, I love the work you do. I'm actually, I'm a leader. I'm somebody who's trying to improve my technical skills. I'm trying to break into the technology industry even more. So, can you tell me a little bit about your role? Can you tell me about this technology topic, etc.? a lot more people are actually more inclined to respond because they also want to get their brand identity across to you. They also want you to think of them as experts. So I feel like just messaging somebody, just tweeting to somebody is a very effective way of, getting your foot in the door sometimes. Something from my own personal life is that I was able to get about 3 mentors through just tweeting, through just like reaching out and saying, I would love your help, I would love your insight. And something else that's happened through digital brand and just asking people is, I got my board role as a Steve for a charity because I just got in touch and I said, I love the work you do. And I said, I would love to volunteer and help you out. And I did one thing for them, and then that relationship just grew. They probably looked at my brand and thought, oh, she's kind of perfect for what we do. So that's how I was able to turn my digital brand into an actual opportunity. I also tend to get like lots of invites to speak at events, etc. Because somebody looks at my brand and thinks of me as somebody who's emerging, that's somebody who is a young professional, somebody who is a recent graduate, so can probably talk about herself in a very raw and in progress sort of a way. And then finally, the last 2 things, and I think a lot of people say this, and it's a bit of a cliche, but do follow companies, prospective employers, join communities and groups, because what it is, to be very honest with you, is it's a way to trick the algorithm online, just show the algorithm that you're in that industry for real, and the algorithm then sort of tends to aggregate that and show you as a top candidate for recruiters, for employers, etc. So it really is a game of just, kind of really being out there and being super vocal. Having said that, I will now move on to some branding hacks that I have for you. And I will try to take you through my LinkedIn a little bit more to kind of see some of these hacks really come to life. So the first thing, and this is something I want you to really take away from my talk, is that your personal brand is actually not just online. What it is that it is your whole self. Your personal brand is how you interact with people in your real life. It's about how you do your job. It's about how you present yourself in a group of people, and your online, your digital brand is an extension of that. It has a very interesting relationship with it. If you feel like you're doing great in your real life, that will be reflected in your digital brand. The same way, if you practice some discipline, if you kind of, if you really show people your potential online, that will also creep into your behaviors in person. The reason I say that is I feel like after journalism, when I moved into technology and I sort of started getting into technology and all these passions that I have, the more I was vocal online, the more I practiced my behavior online, the more I became like that person, like my mindset also changed. So it really is, it's a very integrated relationship with your personal brand, who you are as a person and what you're online. Holding some behaviors really helps manage all of that and really makes you feel like you're on the right track, and people will also notice you for that. The second point is simply about channels. Like I mentioned to you while I was talking, it's about just picking the right channel to do what you want with it. So, you could be a music artist, you can be into technology, journalism. There is always something that is very relevant to your industry. And just being on there really changes, how people see you as involved and invested in your career. Another wonderful channel to join probably is called Dots. It's for people who are probably into more the creative career. Finally, moving on to the third point, which is about Linktree. It's a very interesting tool, actually. It is a tool that you can just Google right away if you'd like, and it basically helps you create a tree of different links that you want to show the world. But as we all know, on Twitter, on Instagram, in your bio, you can only have one, only one sort of link at any given point of time. The best thing to do is point them towards your link tree, which is a tree of lots of other wonderful things about you. And you can sort of use that to aggregate your content. If you're a creative person, if you're somebody who writes a lot of blogs, who has YouTube videos, etc., you can put all of those links into your link tree, and everybody can access that in one click. And then I think I've mentioned a little bit about hashtags. It's a little bit weird, but please do think about it. Do keep your hashtags, a few hashtags, but hashtags that really matter to you. So if you're looking for mentors, if you're looking for a job, if you're just looking to get your story across, then use a hashtag that's quite relevant to that. And then digital hack number 5 is, in your early stages of your career, look for mentors. Honestly, this is the best way to get yourself out there. I feel like my digital brand has grown because I have lots of mentors. I tell them about the work I do, and all they do is just hit a retweet or a share, and suddenly I'm on their brand, and everybody who follows them looks at me. And that really helps because I'm suddenly a part of a circle, essentially. And then I have 2 branding hacks for which I'll quickly show you my LinkedIn as well. But if you scroll down to your LinkedIn profile, you will see something called skills, and I'm sure you have some skills there. But make sure you keep updating your skills. You can change these skills if you want, depending on what role you're going for. But also they have something called skills assessments on LinkedIn, which basically they answer some questions, and they basically give you like a score and how good you are at that skill. And when a recruiter looks you up, they see you as somebody who's very good at the skill. Your skill just really comes up on their search, essentially. I'll show you that in a second. And then my final hack for you to take away today is this wonderful feature that I really like on LinkedIn. It's called featured posts. It's right under your summary section, and you can choose some of your posts or anything that's happened to you as featured, and people will see that in the first instant when they look at your profile. And that really helps me because a lot of people, when they look me up on LinkedIn, they look at my headline, they look at my summary, and they think, okay, so what has she done? And I can show my posts, and they can quickly interact with all the wonderful things that I want them to look at. I want them to see me as, that emerging leader. So what I'll do is I'll quickly just jump on to my LinkedIn and just give you a quick view of what skills assessments and featured posts look like. Just a second. So yeah, I really do encourage you to go and check my LinkedIn out, connect with me, and explore all these things that I've just probably told you. So as you can see, can everybody see my screen?
Hi, Ritu. We can now. Yes, we can. Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. So yeah, that's my LinkedIn. That's my about section. As you can see, that's my featured posts. These are posts across, across time that I have posted, got wonderful interaction, and I want people to keep seeing it. So I just select them and add them all in here. And people can just look at it as soon as they get into it. So to give you an example of what one of my, posts look like, this is about an award that I was nominated for just this week, actually. And I thought that I want people to know about this. So I quickly added it to my featured posts. So I keep getting likes on this even after, a while, actually. So I feel that's quite cool. And then just going back to my profile, I just wanted to show you my LinkedIn skills. And I'm pretty sure you all know a lot about skills because people endorse these skills. And this is exactly what comes up when people look at you on LinkedIn. All you have to do is quickly just click on take a skill quiz. It asks some questions. It gives you some badges. And that really helps the LinkedIn algorithm pick you if somebody is looking for a role, or a candidate or anything like that. So yeah, having said all of this, I just think that I will quickly wrap up and give you a few last takeaways probably. And it's essentially, don't pressurize yourself. It feels very, it feels like there's a formula to it. It feels like you have to do these things if you want to succeed. I'll be very honest with you. I feel like it is an extension of making yourself vocal, making yourself confident, and helping people see you for who you really are, because a CV isn't enough. So always just think of this as, I have my CV, I'm trugging along with my career, I'm doing everything that needs to be done. The digital brand is an extension of who I am, a quick way of people to see me and meet me without meeting me, but also a way to have fun and be seen as somebody who is, a lot more than just an employee, somebody who is a complete person, somebody who adds to your culture. And the reason I say this is because it's really helped me. I position myself as, like I said to you, an emerging leader, an IT consultant, a speaker, all of these things, but I also constantly show myself as somebody who is young, somebody who is a young graduate, and most importantly, somebody who wants to learn, like reaching out to people, posting, content about me doing a certification, etc. It really helps people see me as somebody who is willing to learn, to see me as somebody they should give a chance to. And it's really helped me kind of accelerate my career. I never expected to go from journalism to technology and see all these amazing things happen to me. And it still feels a little bit surreal. But if I had to point at one thing that's helped me get to this point, is definitely my digital brand. And I really encourage you to have one for yourself. Please connect with me. Please interact with me. I'm more than happy to look at your brand, give you some pointers if you like. And the same way you can look at my brand and give me pointers about my brand. And connecting with people who are, like you, probably in the same boat as you, is just as helpful as talking to experts, etc. Having lots of friends online is a wonderful way of sharing with your peers and getting yourself to help each other, essentially. But yeah, with that, I'll leave you. I've spoken for a very long time, and we'll move on to questions, and I'll pass it on to Laura. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Manuel and Ritu, for your presentations. There was a lot of really useful insight and takeaways there. We have got some questions, so I am going to read out in no particular order. The first one is for you, Manuel. What is your recommendation? You did touch on this in your presentation, but some of our guests have asked the whole photo or no photo in your LinkedIn profile. Are you able to just elaborate on whether you would put a photo on your CV?
Sure. That's an interesting one, right? Because I mean, coming from Germany, or on the continent, it was always there was a big focus on putting photos on CVs when I was young, which is many years ago. That has changed now, and it's probably a good thing on the CV because it is about application first and foremost. So the only reason why you send a CV is to a company is because you want them to include you in the process of hiring you. And we all know that unfortunately buyers can play a role, and pictures can play a big role in swinging a decision one way or the other. And so I think it's not expected anymore to put a photo on your CV. So obviously it's up to you. It is a decision you can personally make, but it's not something the company should request, and you don't have to put it on a CV. And it's not that a recruiter will look at it and say, oh, they didn't put a photo in CV and see this as something negative. Actually, some companies even go further now. They even blind CVs and taking off names, because we know there's lots of bias against names, unfortunately, as well. And they're also taking out sometimes now universities where people are coming from to make it more equal especially for graduates. So I used to work at Deloitte. I know that they did that many years ago in their graduate recruitment. They basically would take university out as well to kind of even avoid more bias. So I think in a recruitment process on a CV, you don't need to put a photo on, or it's completely fine to not do it. I think on LinkedIn it's slightly different. What I said earlier, it's not only about getting hired, it's also about networking, it's about getting to know people, it's about sharing, building relationships and those kind of things, completely separate from maybe getting a job as well. And of course, there are recruiters on LinkedIn, and they will look at your profile and they will see your picture. But I think you're not only there for the recruiters, and therefore I would see LinkedIn more as a networking tool, and hence the recommendation to always have a picture on there for sure.
Great, thank you very much. The next question I think would be great for both of you to answer. So in LinkedIn pages and descriptions, is it better to write about yourself and your achievements in the first person or in the third person? So if I could put that to you first, Manuel, please.
Sure. You know what? I think this is a preference, I write in the first person, but that's just my style and how I probably I feel more comfortable doing. And I think if I see somebody else, I know that Ritu in her profile, she has it in the third person. So I think it is just a style. I think it's a choice what you make. I don't think it is that I could say you should always do it this way or the other way. I think it comes back to what are you most comfortable with, and what is your authentic kind of voice in that sense, and you should just go with that. That's my.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sorry, I completely agree with that. Definitely, I think a choice. In my opinion, how I've looked at my profile and done that is I've kept my LinkedIn summary third person, because I sometimes think that when somebody is looking me up online, they don't know me yet, so they are looking at me for the first time, and I leave it in third person because it feels more formal. But as soon as they get invested in my brand, all my posts, anything after that point is always in first person, because I feel like the interaction has changed. Now this person knows me and they're invested in me and they want to know more about me. So I can be a little bit more informal, tell them, and completely own my story in that.
Great, thank you. The next question, again, it would be great if both of you were able to answer this one, please. Should you include a non-relevant work on a CV if you don't have very much relevant work experience apart from coursework? So, for many of our guests who are students, they will have many transferable skills gained through part-time jobs, but it might not be so related to their degrees. They have a lot of extensive coursework experience. So how important is non-relevant work experience to the job that you're applying to?
Do you want to go first, Manuel?
I can go first. Yeah, sure. Short answer, yes. Please always include, because, and I'll tell you why. So, long answer. As a recruiter, when I look at somebody's CV or profile when they apply, and they have been a student, and then they basically have been doing a lot of different jobs while they're studying, it tells me a lot about that person. It tells me that they must be very ambitious, they're very driven. It probably tells me that they used to kind of be very autonomous, because they have to maybe kind of earn their own living to a certain degree to maybe finance their studies. So it tells me a lot about I can make some, at least I did probably make some assumptions about their personality from that. And then apart from that, I think my point earlier in the presentation, you can always then point out transferable skills, because I think any job you did, I mean, I did the paper round when I was younger. I was working in a factory. I did lots of things had nothing to do with what I'm doing now. I was at one point, Ritu, you'll be pleased to hear, I was actually writing, was an editor for a newspaper, like for a student or like a school newspaper. But the point is, what do you think add to skills? You learn communication skills. You learn how to deal with unhappy customers. You learn how to time manage. You learn how to answer the phone. So I would say yes. I mean, obviously there's a limit. You shouldn't write 5 pages about all these things, but you can actually summarize maybe some of the summer jobs, or the fact that you were shopping while you were studying. And you can maybe summarize also your key learnings or your key takeaways from those jobs in that sense. I would definitely include it on my CV for sure.
I agree with Manuel completely. I think especially if you're a student, you want to put as much work that you've done out there. The trick here is to probably recognize what the job or the role really requires and really bring out those skills as part of what you call non-relevant work. So for example, if you were applying, actually I'll take my own example, when I was applying to technology, all my roles were like a production assistant, a communications assistant, a social media manager, etc. What I did is I left them on there because I want people to see me as somebody who's professional, has had roles before, because it just shows you're not just like a student, you're actually somebody who's had a job before. And then I called out, like the skills, for example, with being able to manage Facebook ads, being able to run Google AdWords, or being able to, arrange meetings and being able to lead meetings, etc. And that's something you will obviously use in your own tech career. Another thing I want to probably add is, even if you are being a little bit, conscious about what you put on your CV, on LinkedIn, put everything on there. Yeah, because all it is a massive list, and it's even better if you have some roles on there. People will look at it, click on it, and they will look at it. So even if you're more conservative on the CV, make sure that on LinkedIn you put every role you've ever had, because it really shows your growth in total.
Great, thank you. This is a nice quick question for both of you. What is the protocol about on LinkedIn accepting invitations from people that you don't know? What do you think about that? Manuel.
Should I go first again? Okay. So yeah, again, this is, I mean, you say it's a short question, but I think there's so many different, like, again, it's a bit of a philosophy. Like, some people accept everything. Some people say, I only accept invites from people that I met in person. My view is a little bit, I want to see a certain relevance. I don't just accept any invitation that comes. I want some relevance, and I would always therefore give people the tip: never send a blank invitation. Always like a personal note. You have, I think, about 300 characters. So when you send an invitation, and I've seen, thankfully, a few people sent me some already while we were speaking the last hour and a half, and they said, hey, this is from the event, and so on. And I know when I look at my invitations in a few days, because I probably do them once a week or so, and I know where this comes from. So I would always personalize it. You can do it when you're on your desktop or laptop version. Prompts you for it. When you're on your mobile, it's a bit silly because it sends the connection request straight away. So when you click actually on the 3 dots, you can actually personalize the invite. So I would always personalize. But I think, again, if you're the receiver of these invitations, it's your preference. My preference is I want a little bit of context, and then I accept. But there's so many different philosophies out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with Manuel again. I think I'll probably take a spin on this as somebody who's new to the industry, probably. I felt like when I was just starting out, I was more keen to accept lots of connections, to be honest, because I was just getting in there. I think where you are in your career can override this decision of who you want in your network. But something that I always look at, probably, if you forget to send a personal note, I always look at what my common connections are. If I see people who are more relevant to me or already connected to this person, then I'm more likely to invite them to be a part of my network. I, for some reason, in the last year, I've had a massive explosion on LinkedIn, and I have over like 4,000 connections, and it's a very big group of like students and industry experts and people who are at the same level as me. And I think that helps us probably grow my network a little bit more and get connected with the people they are connected with. So yeah, keep an open mind. Always look for like a pattern, essentially.
Great, thank you. Ritu, a question for you is that you studied journalism at the university, and then now you're working in a tech career. So how did you make that transition, and how did that come about?
Thank you for that question. This question is essentially my entire brand. So the first thing is, go follow me on my LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, because I talk about this a lot. It's very close to my heart. So essentially, once I was, in journalism, I probably had one of those moments where I was thinking about what more can I do in my life? What is my real passion? And technology was the answer, because I felt like there's so much in technology that I can do. I've also discovered that technology is not just, coders and programmers. There's so much more into it, and that's what I wanted to bring to it. A quick reason is because I was given an opportunity, and this is something very important. I was given an opportunity to be able to pursue this dream. Since I've been in this role, I've really tried to upskill myself. So I do lots of certifications on my own. There's lots of free certifications available as well. I tend to, just study on FutureLearn or Udemy. And every time I learn something, I post it on my LinkedIn. I say, hi, I've just completed this course in AI, in machine learning. And what it does is, one, it gives me confidence, but two, it also shows people that I'm very invested in my learning. And And finally, the transition has been smooth, especially because I have a really good network of people who support me, see my potential, and they encourage me to do even more in tech careers. And you know what? You'll be surprised, but now I'm thinking about I want to be on a tech board. I want to be a management consultant. I want to do an MBA. And all these things just go on to show that, you know, just because I've made one career change, I'm not going to stop here. You'll see me doing something new very soon.
Oh, thank you for that. This is hopefully a quick question to you both. What do you think? How long should a CV be?
Do you want me to go first? Again, I think this is a little bit personal. I think the industry standard that a lot of people sort of suggest is 1 page. That's the best way to be, I think, you know, much higher chances and things like that. For me personally, because I've made a career change, I think I tend to write a little bit more on my CV because I want this person to be able to connect those dots, you know, that I have studied journalism, but technology. So I have a 2-page CV, and a section that I'm very proud of in my CV is I talk about key achievements right at the beginning, just after my introduction, my summary, because I want people to see how I have made you know, a business impact when it comes to technology. So yeah, 2 pages with me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of a 1-page CV. I feel sometimes it can then be people feel like they have to cram everything in. I think it is much more what Rituja said. It's about the right structure. So put the important things on the first page, but a CV can be I think my CV is 2 or 3 pages, and it really doesn't matter because I'd rather have more content and more detail in a CV when I'm a recruiter. But the first page is still the one that needs to really pop. So I think it's more about putting the important things there and the structure of your CV and the content.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how much time do you spend networking and connecting with others on social media channels per day?
That's a very interesting one. Honestly, since COVID, a lot more is my first answer. And as somebody who's you know, new to the industry, but also somebody who's very early on in their career, I tend to, I would say, about 2 hours of my day, which sounds like a lot probably, but it's because I'm actually having meaningful conversations. So I tend to have, like I said, informational interviews or with my mentors. I mentioned before, I think I call it a timetable, which is very old-fashioned, but essentially I do have a timetable where I go in the morning when I wake up, you know, I'm going to make my first tweet at probably 9, but then I keep my phone away because I concentrate on work. But then I look at it in the afternoon and then once again in the evening. That's how I stagger out my 2 hours of networking.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at LinkedIn, I was literally living on LinkedIn, so that was like a bit too much. I think now it's a bit more normal. So I would say, and again, I spend obviously time on LinkedIn also as a recruiter, so it's like slightly different. But for my own personal networking, I'm not as structured organized as Ritu, I have to say. So I'm probably doing 4 or 5 posts a week whenever there's something interesting, like today when we got this Halloween surprise from the company. And I have to say again, Ritu might be horrified, but I'm actually not on any other social media platform. So I'm not on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, nowhere else. So I've put all my focus on LinkedIn, but it's probably, I would say, half an hour a day, a mix of posting, but also scrolling and just like doing admin and so on as well to keep up to date for my personal usage. And then professional usage is on top of that.
Great, thank you. We are nearly at 8 o'clock, but there's a couple more questions, if you're right to answer those. Somebody has asked, are there any risks around data protection when it comes to content that you're putting online, and are there risks with data protection and your identity brand since it will be in the public domain?
I'll go first, Daniel, if you don't mind. The answer is yes. You know, there is something about that. We all have to be a lot more careful. And probably to share a little bit about what's happened to me previously is I work for like a banking industry, like I said. So people tend to be a little old-fashioned perhaps, and some people see me as crazy, for the lack of a better word, like put so much on LinkedIn, and then they see me constantly on it. And I think somebody's mentioned to me before saying, you should be careful about what you're posting. You probably shouldn't post something on, when you're on annual leave or sick leave, because people will find out what you're doing. So people have that sort of connotation with social media, to be honest. But as a new generation, I feel like I should completely own it. So these are the things that I do to be data compliant, essentially, because I work in the Czech banking industry. It's actually very, very sensitive. One, I don't use any social media sites on my work computer, just LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's kind of safe. I'm a lot more filtered on LinkedIn. Two, I don't ever post pictures of like my screen, in case there's any information on my screen, so I tend to avoid that a lot. And finally, if I'm out on, like, let's say a work do or something more work related, and people probably might be a little bit more uncomfortable, then I don't post pictures of them or anything that I'm doing on the night out. I say night out, but essentially I try to keep that a little bit more private. And those are simple ways of how you can be completely compliant and not worry too much about leaking something by mistake.
And I would probably just add from specifically for LinkedIn, I can say that there's actually when you go into your profile, you click on the little picture of you on the menu bar on the right side. There's a whole section around privacy settings, and one example is you can actually set a setting that only LinkedIn members can see your CV. You can see your profile. So if you're not a member of LinkedIn, then you can't actually access your profile at all. And then you can actually, for every section of your profile, you can set different privacy settings. So you could, for example, say only people in my network that are a first-degree connection can see my picture, or only people in my network can see details of my work experience, or whatever it is. So that obviously depends. And again, if you're actively job searching, I would always say maybe not so much of a good idea, because you want to be more out there. But if you're happy in a job and you probably don't want so many people approaching you, or you don't want to necessarily grow your network that massively, then you can rein them in again. And that's something you can actually change on a daily basis if you wanted to. So it's very easy. I do agree that it is definitely worth being very careful and very kind of Ritu's point, be aware of the fact that what is out there is usually out there, so it's very difficult to then rein it back in. I mean, I still see pictures of myself when I was 20 years old as an intern, the Red Cross, with a silly picture that they took of me, and I can't get it off the internet. It's still out there somewhere. If you Google my name and Red Cross, you're probably going to find it somewhere. So yeah.
Great. I'm going to ask just one more question, and that is, there's a lot of debate about keeping personal life separate from professional life, especially on LinkedIn. What is your take on that?
Okay, so my take is that you are usually not, lots of people have pictures of their family on their desk at work, right? And they talk about what they did on the weekend at work. They talk about their hobbies, and they talk to, when they're in sales, they're talking to their customers about their favorite football club, and they're talking about what their favorite restaurant is or holiday destination. So I think it is a myth to say we are this professional persona that is only about work, and then we're this personal persona. And people always imply that we are crazy at home, and we can't, and therefore we have to be somebody else at work. And that's obviously also not true. I think it's just to Ritu's point earlier, you should demonstrate whatever your core values, your beliefs are, that you have at home. You shouldn't basically change them when you go to work. You obviously behave differently at work in various situations, the same as you would behave differently when you meet your partner's parents, and when you meet your partner's best friends. And so I think we all know how to behave in a social context in that sense. And I think I would just apply that same principle to LinkedIn or to the online world. I would never post any pictures where I'm I don't know, where I'm drinking alcohol, or where I'm in a beach or something on LinkedIn. But then pictures I would probably have on my desk, like from my partner or from my niece or my nephew, I don't see a reason why not posting them. So I think it's okay to be human on LinkedIn, and it doesn't mean it has to be all about work. But you obviously have to just be a little bit mindful of that.
Yeah, when it comes to me, I think I will refer back to Manuel's point of don't post something on LinkedIn that you wouldn't be comfortable when it's on, on the front page of a newspaper. As long as you kind of, I think, follow that, that's perfect for LinkedIn. When it comes to probably other channels, and I'll touch on that a little bit more, because I feel like, as young people, as young graduates, we tend to have a massive digital footprint, and we shouldn't have to control that at all. So probably looking at your privacy settings and making sure if you're using Instagram for a lot of personal things, you don't want people to look at that, then probably make that private. If you're on Twitter and you are quite vocal, then probably be yourself and don't probably put like restrictions on yourself, because if you're on Twitter, everybody's there for just that very reason. So always like kind of be real. Make sure that you have some sort of rules on yourself as to how you want to use every channel. Again, to give you an example from my life, for me, LinkedIn is, I make sure that anything that I post on Instagram doesn't go to LinkedIn. That's one of my biggest rules. It's just, I'm very different on, Instagram. I'm very flamboyant. I put a lot about myself out there. LinkedIn is more controlled. Twitter is more, like there should be like a call to action. I should say something and I want people to I put whatever I want on it, and obviously something that is with my brand, of course, and I just make sure that those rules and those demarcations are always very clear with my own digital brand, at least.
Great, thank you so much. So it is just past 8 o'clock, so we're going to leave it there. I know there were a few more questions that we didn't get round to, but thank you both so much for sharing all of your wonderful insights today.